Good evening, everybody. Welcome to our October work session. Please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, Mrs. Sugars, could you please do roll call?
Mrs. Arroyo?
Here.
Ms. Friedel?
Here.
Mr. Goodwin?
Here.
Mrs. Matlack?
Here.
Mrs. Neary?
Here.
Mr. Avadia?
Here.
Mrs. Schultz?
Here.
Mrs. Tong?
Here.
Mrs. Seidel?
Here. Okay, so we're going to kick off our meeting tonight with some really exciting board recognition. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Malosh to kick us off.
Thank you, Mrs. Seidel. This is always one of my favorite evenings for board meetings. Now, I typically like almost all, if not all, the board meeting nights, but this is always one of my favorite evenings during the course of the fall cycle, because we take the opportunity to recognize staff members that have been in the district for a milestone number of years. This year, we are recognizing staff members for 20 years of service, for 25 years of service, and for 30 years of service. And the names that I'm going to read to you tonight are made up of men and women who have dedicated the majority of their professional careers to Cherry Hill. They are teachers at every level, from Barkley through the high school. There are nurses and counselors and therapists, child study team members. There are administrators that are on this list. An incredible group of human beings, again, who have dedicated themselves to the children and the families here in Cherry Hill. So I feel very fortunate to be able to call them colleagues. I'm very thankful that I know everybody that's on this list. And the total number of years that these employees have served Cherry Hill is 2,225.
Wow.
So when you hear these names, 2,225 years of service to our community. So incredibly thankful. Congratulations to all of them. You will receive something from us. Will come through inter-office mail. You are always welcome when we are able to have the board meetings back in person. We hope you will come out to be able to see the board members. So first, for 20 years of service to the Cherry Hill Public School District, Jennifer Aristone, Parry Barkley, Lisa Borelli, Nancy Boyer, Mark Brandreth, Michael Brown, Heidi Brunswick, John Burns, Dina Campbell-Mathias, Paula Cardia, Mary Carpenter, Stacy Carusi, Suzanne Casey, Matt Cieslick, Teresa Convery, Janine Cooney, Tara Corsi, Ann Catoni, Jennifer Kraft, Michael Defner, Amy Devine, Deb DeToria Tabita, Dina Dodd, Joyce Dunges, Margie Dolan, Brian Drury, Leah Dryden, Lori Duffy, Heather Esposito, Dan Feely, Jackie Frikowiak, Kevin Frost, Greg Gagliardi, Melissa Gardner, Scott Grazier, Lisa Hamill, Thomas Howard, Cindy Jaffe, Ryan James, Dennis Kablinger, Julia Kelly, Tara Kirshner, Kim Kiak, Crystal Kittles, Cindy Labetti, Alicia Lamba, Tracy Maida, Joy Malco, Pam Manfredi, Jim Mark, Ann McCaffrey, Jen McCarran, Brendan McGovern, Alejandra Meter, Carolyn Messias, Megan Mikulski, Evelyn Minutolo, Kathy Morgan, Dolores Muselli, Rosaria Norcus, Robin Olin, Annette Page, Paula Pennington, Ed Perino, Mark Pierlot, Eric Radville, Marilyn Radville, Robin Rapport, Tracy Redmond, Denise Roski, Pat Schul, Franny Seacrest, Gretchen Seibert, Rochelle Sengus, Rich Simmers, Eileen Steidel, Susan Stutz Dickinson, Thomas, Jerry Trick, Lauren Yerk, Danielle Verano, Josh Weinstein, Stephanie Weinstein, Allison Weinchick, Eric Wood, and Susan Young. Those are the staff members that have served the district for 20 continuous years. Congratulations to all of them. Now, the staff members that have served the district for 25 continuous years. Bob Bonnet, Rachel Conchar, Lawyer Chapman, Chai Shumarik, Anna Close, Rachel Conchar, Patricia McCarthy, Julio Montanez, Terry Nowakowski, Dolores Satin, Jane Schaefer, Valerie Sweeten-Dibner, and John Young. Congratulations to the staff members, 25 years of service. And for 30 years of service, continuous service in Cherry Hill Public Schools. Caroline Emery, Michelle Keynes, Tim Kelleher, Diane O'Brien, Linda Rotella, and Scott Sweeten. Congratulations to those folks. I feel fortunate that we have the opportunity to thank the staff members that we have in our district for their commitment, their time, the investment in our community, and what it means to the students and to the families. Again, 2,225 years of service for these collected staff members. So congratulations to each one. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Wow, that's amazing. Congratulations, and I'll echo Dr. Malash. Thank you for all of those years of service. Next, we will move into correspondence, and I will start. I know that Mrs. Matlack has some correspondence for us tonight, so I'll start with you.
Great, thanks so much. I just have a brief update. The state county leadership meeting was held on October 5th. This is the twice monthly meeting that has been held since back in March of all the county leaders in the state, and I'm there representing Camden County along with Joyce Miller, who is the president of the Camden County School Boards Association, and I'm there as vice president. This meeting was, as all the meetings are, run by Ray Pinney, who is from the New Jersey School Boards Association, and at this meeting we had two guests speaking to us, and they were two teachers. One is Kimberly Hughes, who is the state teacher of the year from Haddonfield, and the other was Jennifer Olowski, who is the Middlesex County Teacher of the Year from New Brunswick. So they were just talking about their experiences. Kimberly is from Haddonfield, and they are doing a hybrid model right now, and Jennifer is from New Brunswick Elementary, and they're doing all virtual. So they were just giving their perspective on how it's going for their districts. They both had consensus that it was a difficult transition for the teachers, but they feel that they are all doing are getting into the groove of what they're doing, and they were both very admirable of how adaptable their students were. Kimberly is a high school teacher and Jennifer is a elementary phys ed teacher. So they were coming from very different perspectives, but they were both in agreement on how adaptable the kids were to their changes and the models and the remote learning. So that was really good to hear. There were a lot of questions. Some of them were specific to certain districts in the state. yeah, it was a good meeting. It was only about 45 minutes long, but it was good to hear from their perspective. And I'll report again on the next meeting, which will be next week. So thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you, Mrs. Matlack. And on the heels of your talking about Teacher of the Year, I would be remiss if I didn't mention that sitting next to me here is the Region 3 Superintendent of the Year, who is also a finalist for the State Superintendent of the Year. So congratulations to Dr. Malash on this great honor, and fingers crossed for a victory in early November. So more to come on that, but congratulations.
Thank you, Ms. Seidel. That's very kind. Thank you.
Does anybody else have anything to share with us tonight? Correspondence. Mr. Avadia.
Yes, the Camden County Educational Services Commission met on October 7th for a record meeting. I'm not sure. It's definitely a record for me. I don't know if it's a record for the commission, but within 12 minutes we got the best of what was new. The biggest thing is the Educational Service Commission, Camden County, does a couple things kind of on the side, which I try to keep this board updated on. And the one that was highlighted was they put out a grant to place more licensed mental health professionals in schools. They were sort of overwhelmed by the response. About 2 times the schools applied to them to participate, which was 15 districts and 55 schools in total. So they were very happy about that. Otherwise, things at the commission are good, and they did ask us all to get excited about Workshop 2020, which is all virtual this year, you know, where we have a lot of different education stuff that we can be part of. So it was a very nice meeting, and just, you know, as in our role there as board of directors, we make sure that everything is going well, and it is.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Avadia. Does anyone else have anything? Okay, if not, I just want to take a moment to read off the names of our school board candidates for coming up in the general election. We have Miss Corinne Elmore Stratton, Miss Carol Matlack, Mr. John Papica, Miss Asselhan Kakmak, and Miss Miriam Stern. There are 5 candidates running for 3 open positions. Okay, so next we will move into our first public comment period. First public comment period is for agenda items that the board will be acting on this evening. When submitting your public comments via email for the first public comment period, please indicate in the email subject line the agenda item number. And comments can be submitted to lshugars@chclc.org. Mrs. Sugars?
Okay, I just have a few items. Give me 1 moment. Okay, just have a few for the first public comment period. The first one we have is from Kristen Master. I understand Rachel Conchar is being recognized for 25 years of service. She was my daughter's very first teacher 5 years ago. Miss Rachel is dedicated to meeting the students where they are and helping them grow. The 2 years my daughter had Miss Rachel, the class was diverse in needs. My daughter was nurtured and challenged, and I am forever grateful she was afforded a positive start to her education experience. Congratulations, Miss Rachel. I hope many more classes get to experience your skill through the coming years. The next public comment is from Meredith and Amelia Shalik. I recently learned that Tracy Mattia was being honored for 20 years of service to the Cherry Hill School District. I would like to offer this statement in honor of this great achievement. My daughter Amelia has a rare disease that causes, among other things, muscle paralysis, ataxia, and global development delays. I moved to Cherry Hill shortly after Amelia's diagnosis because I had heard such great things about the Barkley Early Childhood Center. I was not sure how Amelia's disease would progress, but everything that I had read suggested that learning during ages 3 to 7 might be all that she could gain in her life. Amelia was assigned to Tracy Mattia's class as a 3-year-old. She who could not walk independently and spoke only about 15 words. Tracy's enthusiasm for special education inclusion, calm demeanor, and caring nature allowed me to feel confident about leaving my medically fragile daughter in her capable hands. By the end of Amelia's time at Barkley, she was able to walk across the stage to get her diploma from Tracy. Amelia called out to me in the audience as she walked back to her spot, "Look, Mom, I won." Amelia definitely won because she had Tracy to start us off so well in Cherry Hill Public Schools. Congratulations on 20 years, Tracy. Our next comment is Mindy Rosen. On the agenda are the 2 representatives representing Cherry Hill East and Cherry Hill West with alternatives. Why is the alternative school not representative? I personally feel this is discriminatory and does not represent all the students in high school. I believe one may have come in. Nope, that's for the second one. So that's it. That's all for first public comment.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so that moves us into our board work session, and I will turn it over to Mrs. Matlack to share our committee meeting update from curriculum and instruction.
Thank you, Mrs. Seidel. The C&I Curriculum and Instruction Committee met on October 5th, and we had 4 items on our agenda. The first one was the New Jersey Student Learning Assessment Report. Since there was no testing in the spring, we have no state data to report. So Ms. Sadwin and Ms. Katsikas discussed the items that would be included in the October 27th board presentation. They talked about the Access for ELS data. That's the English language learners testing data. And so Mrs. Katsikas will be sharing some very positive information regarding the student performance on those assessments, comparing the 2019 and 2020 results. Much of this testing was completed before March, although not all of it. So we will be able to get at least some look at that testing data. The committee discussed concerns regarding the lack of data at the elementary level. So Ms. McCartney and Ms. Katsikas discussed with us the assessments that are being developed in district at the elementary and secondary level to inform instruction, and that will ultimately be able to be used in conjunction with state testing to inform and refine instruction when we are able to have state testing again.
It's not like we lost
You're on
audio for
mute.
you.
Oh dear, I'm sorry about that.
That's okay. Now we can hear you.
Great. So on each of these agenda items, Dr. Mahan has put which goal, which district goal it relates to. So I'll share that with you as I go through it. So this first one was related to the purpose and passion goal, student outcome assessments. Next up, we had the PSAT schedule. We discussed that, which is going to occur tomorrow, October 14th. For that, the Monday-Wednesday remote schedule was flipped to accommodate the testing. There was much prep involving administration and CHEA to ensure safety and teacher supervision, which involved, the cleaning of facilities, the availability of hand sanitizer and wipes and things like that. Buses will be running, social distancing and masks were addressed. There will be a home health screening that is required for the students coming in. And Mr. Goodwin asked, what about those students who are unable to test due to not passing the screening or developing symptoms of COVID-19? So Dr. Mahan reached out to the College Board and posed that question to them, and they responded that the district would have the option of administering again on January 26, 2021, to those students who might not be able to test due to health concerns. So that was good. And that comes under
It's also student outcomes, Mrs.
student outcomes. Yes, I'm sorry. I had that highlighted on another piece of paper and was looking for it. Thank you. The Social Justice Committee update was given to us. That committee met on October 5th. They discussed their work and the work of the Cultural Proficiency, Equity, and Character Education Committee and how the two groups align. It was also the critical literacy was also discussed, which the goal is to diversify the literature students engage with. And the book that they're currently going to use is Born a Crime by Trevor Noah. And then the PD sessions with Dr. Goldie Mohammed continue with the session last week and another one on October 19th. And that goal is student wellness, cultural proficiency, equity, character education, and the work of being anti-racist. And then the last item on our agenda was the Return to Learn plan. Dr. Mahan shared with us the meetings with the subcommittees, and feedback from parents, staff, and students was discussed and considered by these committees. And so I'm going to ask Dr. Mahan to just go over and share with us, you know, some of those things that were shared with the committee.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Matlack. So the Return to Learn Committee has continued to meet over the last few weeks. Today was the first day, or actually yesterday was the first day of the early dismissal schedule at the middle school and elementary school, with a condensed day both being dismissed at 1 o'clock. So we are looking forward to the feedback on that schedule. I just remind everyone that we did shift to the early dismissal day in the condensed time to allow for reduced screen time for students. We wanted to address student stamina and their ability to be online for the entirety of the day. And most importantly, we wanted to have a schedule that would really help us to transition into the hybrid model. So in the next couple of days, you will be receiving information regarding the hybrid model that we plan to implement. And I think that's it. Mrs. Matlack, I don't know if you want me to add anything else.
Nope, I think that's all. I would like to share a point that Mr. Goodwin made at the meeting when he said, it's very possible we may have to go all remote again at some point. So it makes sense to keep perfecting our remote offering for the students. And I thought that was something, that really solidified this in my mind, that, we're working towards, towards perfection, and hopefully getting closer. So that's all. I'll ask if there are any committee members who have anything else that they would like to share about any of these items. Lori?
Thanks, Carol. I would just say that I was able to participate in the middle school We Return to Learn committee meeting, and which was a pleasure. Everyone had a lot of insightful feedback as far as what they were seeing and feeling with the students for the remote schedule, things that they would tweak to make it better. So they had really noted what they were seeing from the students and what would help them transition best to the hybrid model, and things that they would do, differently as they are just in the weeds of it now versus, best laid plans until you start to do it. So it was a lot of great feedback. It was very positive, and I was grateful to be able to sit in and participate and hear from the staff and what they also were hearing from their students. So I thought it was really, really helpful.
Thank you. Any other comments? Okay.
No.
Miss Friedel?
are you moving on to non-committee members? I wasn't sure if you were
Oh.
closing out.
Sure. Or any questions from anybody, go right ahead.
I actually just have more of a comment. I just want to say that Dr. Mahan and the teachers and the administrators and the staff truly are working so hard on this remote plan, and Dr. Malash as well. And you know, they really are trying to play a game where there is no, there's no making everybody happy. But I really do want to acknowledge, I was able to sit in on the elementary meeting, and they really are looking at every side of every option. And I just want to acknowledge that and thank them.
Yes,
Thank
agree.
you. Yeah, that's well said. You know, it is very much appreciated, the hard work that everybody and all the number of people who are on those committees, the time and effort that they've put into it, trying to do the best they can, and you know, we're working towards, you know, getting this right. So thank you. Anybody else? Any other questions or comments?
I just second what Mrs. Friedel said. I agree. You guys are doing a fantastic job.
And I was going to give a third and give a shout out to the high school committee, because I was able to sit in on the high school committee's work last week. And again, so impressed with the questions and with the thought that is going into all of this in this, you know, very difficult, unprecedented time. So again, I'll echo a huge thank you to Dr. Mahan and everybody that's participated in all of this hard work over the past few months. So thank you again.
Great.
Mrs. Matlack, do you mind if I jump in for 1 second?
Not at all. Not at all.
I just wanted to say thank you for all of the kind remarks. And, you know, this is definitely a Herculean task that we are undertaking, and everyone is trying to do, like I said before, what is in the best interest of our students, what's in the best interest of our staff. And although we have had some missteps, we will get this right. But we are dealing with a lot of competing voices and trying to really find some middle ground in this game that Mrs. Friedel said that we're playing. So your confidence in us as a committee and as an administrative team is greatly appreciated. Thank you.
You're welcome. That's all I have, Mrs. Seidel.
Absolutely, Dr. Malash.
So I just want to thank Ms. Matlack. Thank you for doing the report out from the CNI meeting and giving the update. And Dr. Mahan, Mrs. Seidel, Ms. Friedel, and Ms. Sneary for the time that they've spent on the committees. And I think that the team has really encapsulated so much that's gone into the work with the We Return to Learn plan. As we've talked about, we have these committees that have been meeting since early in May. You know, and talking about transitioning back to school, you know, that work certainly changed after June 26th when the state came out with the road back, you know, and continued to go on during the course of the summer. We've done multiple presentations at the board level in July and in August. On our website, there's an incredible amount of information on our website. You know, special thank you to Mrs. Wilson, to Mr. Polvinsky, Mr. DiCarlo, and the rest of the technology team who has been maintaining that information and updating it as changes have been made and new information comes out. That is always the best place for folks to look for information. You know, the outline of the hybrid schedule is contained within there. It's in the plan that the board adopted back early in August. The committees, as the folks spoke about, are continuing to meet to look at the hybrid schedule, see what is it going to take place during that week of November the 9th when we launch the hybrid schedule. And we will be launching the hybrid schedule the week of November the 9th. That's taking place. The only thing that would stop us as a school district from launching the hybrid schedule would be a directive from the state of New Jersey or the Department of Health, because there's been an impact in the community health crisis. As a district, we are ready and excited to welcome those students back into our buildings, to have them here with us. Again, there's still more work. It's what we do as educators, right? That's part of the learning process, is how can we continue to make things better? How do we take that feedback? What do we take in? We've heard from a lot of families, and I'm always appreciative of families taking the time to reach out to tell us about their experiences and what's happening for them. We take all of that in. And again, as the folks talked about, being involved in the committee meetings, all of those things are discussed, and they are all weighed together. The most important piece, what is that experience for the child and for the children, all 11,000 of them across the school district. When we make determinations on what's best for 12 elementary schools, an early childhood center, 3 middle schools, 2 comprehensive high schools, and a alternative high school program that we have. That's what we take into consideration. So please check the website. If you have questions about your child's experience and what's going on with their daily schedule, I encourage you to reach out to the teacher. The teacher is always a wealth of information, especially about what's going on in the learning experience for the children. Contact the teacher, contact the building principal, ask them. That's the best place to start when folks are seeking information. So again, to echo all of you, a special thanks to the 80-some, probably at this point more than 80 people that have been involved in those committees to work on these schedules, to debate, to talk, to push, and I appreciate the kind words that folks have sent. Please make sure you thank the teachers, thank the ed assistants, thank the principals, thank the nurses for all that they've been doing. Your kind words, your support, our ability as adults to lend calm, to lend compassion, and to lend understanding to this situation means the world to folks, especially the people that are in the buildings. So incredibly important. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, with that, I will turn it over to Mrs. Schultz to talk about the Business and Facilities Committee meeting.
Thank you, Mrs. Seidel. So the B&F committee, we met Tuesday, October 6th at 6 p.m. and Mrs. Sugars was kind enough to put our committee through a little bit of school finance 101. We had a great meeting. We started off and we talked about the account classification system, and it was really interesting as Mrs. Sugars kind of reviewed with our committee members the entire classification and how our funds work throughout the district. So basically, we went through our general funds, our largest being our governmental funds. So that would be our Fund 10. This is our largest part of our financial statement. Within Fund 10, there are 3 separate funds, Fund 11, Fund 12, and Fund 13. So Fund 11 is really our current fund. That's really where our day-to-day operations are run out of. Fund 12 is our capital outlay fund. That's our locally funded, and that's generally what we do our smaller projects out of. And then Fund 13 is the special school funds. And then we went into Fund 20, which is our special reserve fund. This is our funds where you're going to see more of our grants, so our federal grants, our state grants, and our local grants. Fund 30 is our capital projects fund, and that's our fund where you're going to see where we're doing our larger projects, the funds that generally come from either our capital reserve or our bond referendums. So more of our external sources of funding. The next fund we talked about was Fund 40. That's our debt service fund. So that's really our fund that we set up for our payment of our interest and principals. That's generally what we're using to pay off any type of a bond referendum. So those are kind of our funds. The next couple funds that we talked about was our proprietary funds. These are more set up like they're accounts that we use for food service and SAC. These operate more like a business rather than a governmental fund. And then our last one was our fiduciary funds, and those are holding accounts. We use those such as student activity fees, scholarships, payroll, kind of unemployment, not really day-to-day activities. We kind of talked about how we are going to now be moving our student activity fees though into Fund 20. We wanted just to put a little bit of more rigor around the process so that we can kind of have to issue POs for that, since that fund in particular has quite a large amount of money that runs through that. So after we kind of reviewed all of the funds and the classification systems, Mrs. Sugars did review all of the documents that we as board members do approve on our monthly agendas. So we started with the board secretary report. This report covers all of the governmental funds, which again are funds 10, 20, 30, and 40. So when you review that board secretary report, you see it contains a balance sheet, a recapitulation of fund balance, and both a summary and a detailed revenue and the budget status report. Ms. Sugars kind of talked us through how the balance sheet has to always balance. There's no budget appropriation lines that can be overexpended. And then she also reviewed and kind of talked us through that the certification of that board secretary, that she certifies that to the board each month, and that we as a board also certify that each month and confirm all of this to be true. We then moved into the treasurer's report. And basically this treasurer's report is a report, it's a cash reconciliation. And what this report really does is it reconciles the cash balance found on the board secretary report in addition to the district's accounts, such as our food service and the school age, the SAC report. So it also was, I found interesting that the district's treasurer is independent of the district, also looks at this report, but it's basically a checks and balance for the district. We also looked at the bill list. This report contains vendor names, numbers, purchase order numbers, budget account codes, and then it also will put the person or the department that ordered the item and the amount. Mrs. Friedel did ask if the bills are approved before we send it to the vendor, and then Ms. Sugars kind of explained to us that most of them are, but sometimes due to timing, some checks are cut before. And so examples of that would be utilities and medical benefits. So those sometimes are sent out before we actually approve those bill lists. And then the last report we talked about was the transfer report. So this report does show budget transfers that are made between just budget lines. So if a cumulative budget transfer does exceed 10%, our district has to seek approval from the county office to make the transfer. So we went through all of that. We had about, I think, 5 or maybe so minutes left, but we wanted to keep going. So we did quickly talk about the PO approval process, as we found that was also very important. So Ms. Sugars kind of described the electronic, and I thought this is also important to kind of note that we do have a multi-step approval process in our district. So before anything is purchased, it is the process for the PO does go through multi-levels before anything is purchased. So to kind of get things purchased, the electronic process of approving anything, regardless of where they originate from, they are approved by the purchasing supervisor, the assistant business administrator, and then the final approval is then the BA. And then we also talked about how there's a limit on quotes of $6,600 and bids of $44,000, and how this limit affects the district's purchasing practices. So a lot of times the purchases must be aggregated for the district for the year. And so we will utilize purchasing consortiums whenever possible to avoid issues when these limits are exceeded. So sometimes it does affect the district's ability to use local vendors. So we had a pretty lengthy meeting, got a lot discussed in that quick hour. There were a lot of questions, extremely informative. And then just one quick thing to note, information about budget development will be shared at the November committee meeting, and the comprehensive annual financial report and corresponding audit will be discussed at the December committee meeting. So that's a lot of information. I will certainly pass it to you, Mrs. Sugars, in case there's additional information that I left out or you need to share as well.
No, Ruth did a great job. We even were able to say recapitulation appropriately. I made a little worried about that. I thought it was a really good meeting, and it was an opportunity. I think, you know, when new board members come on, that this is a lot of information for them to absorb at one time. So I think it's nice that board members can get a couple months under their belt and get familiar with the documents, and then we can review them this way. We will open up this training in small groups to board members. If anybody is interested in doing this training, we can do that, you know, 3 board members at a time. So if anyone is interested, just let me know. We'll be happy to do that. And I just wanted to highlight, as we look at our board work session agenda, on our agenda for items that will be approved at the end of the month at our action meeting, we have item 13.2 is our financial reports. Those are just all of the reports that Mrs. Schultz just reviewed. Those are our typical monthly reports that will be approved at the end of the month. And then item number 13.3, I wanted to touch on a little bit. It's approval of non-public school security and technology plans. So what a lot of people don't realize is that the district is a pass-through of non-public funds that come from the state for our corresponding private and parochial schools that are within Cherry Hill. Our largest one is Camden Catholic, but we have some smaller ones. We have Poland State School, we have Resurrection Catholic, we have McCourt Shalom, Temple Shalom, some of the smaller schools. The CAT Center sometimes gets funds for their preschool program. So that is a pass-through that comes through the district. And so we are required to take a look at when they're spending security and technology funds at their plans to kind of, we don't ask for a real detailed plan, but we just kind of want to make sure that the purchases that they're making are in line with the state requirements. And that we also have to make sure, unfortunately for the schools, because they normally don't have to adhere to the stringent purchasing laws that we do, but when they're using these state non-public funds, they do have to adhere to those rules. And so we often have to help them through the purchasing process, and that happens with our purchasing department. Sometimes Mr. Plavinsky has to get involved. Sometimes security folks have to get involved. Mrs. Ridgway always has to get involved with this. So it's a bit of a process, and one more thing that we have to take care of. But even though we have a variety of non-public funds, it's only the security and technology funds that have to actually have their plans approved. So that'll be approved at the next board meeting.
Great. All right. Thank you. Mrs. Schultz, if I may.
Yep.
I just wanted to add thank you, Ms. Sugars, and to Ms. Ridgway. I've been through the School Finance 101 a few times, but as I mentioned that night, I always learn something new when we go through it. So I would definitely encourage the other board members to take advantage of this training opportunity because it really is very valuable. So again, thank you for that.
Mrs. Seidel, I'll put in the memo at the end of the week, just to gauge interest, so that people are interested in doing it, and then we'll select a time for them.
Great.
Hi, can I speak?
Absolutely.
Sure. So, Mrs. Schultz, you did an excellent job of going through all of that information. And Mrs. Sugars, it was so helpful. Thank you so much for doing that. I have a question, not about the update from the meeting, but who reviews the security and technology plans for the non-public schools?
Typically, I'll look at them. Mrs. Ridgway will look at them. Like I said, if we have to involve Mr. Plavinsky for some of them, we will. And really what we're looking for, there's certain things that the state allows you to use them on, certain things that they don't allow you to use them on. So really that's what we're looking for, just to make sure that they're within the guidelines of what the state allows and doesn't allow.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Any other questions? Okay, I will move into our HR committee meeting summary. Our HR meeting was on Tuesday, October 6th, and while I can't discuss all the items we talked about, we did have a discussion about, or the committee received an update on an upcoming open enrollment period for all staff due to new medical, hospitalization, and prescription options that go into effect on January 1st, 2021. This is not going to be a passive open enrollment period, and all staff members hired must log into the benefits portal and choose the plan of their choice. However, staff members hired after July 1st, 2020 are mandated to enroll in this new medical, hospitalization, and prescription plan. The premium sharing for these new plans are based upon a percentage of the staff member's salary versus the old plans being based upon a percentage of the health premiums. We also were given an update on known vacancies for the 2020 and 2021 school year. And our next meeting is scheduled for Wednesday, November 4th. Ms. Adrian, is there anything additional that you'd like to cover?
No, I think that's it. Just that the work session tonight is just primarily leave of absences. All the other HR items will be on the special action just to ensure that people are paid in accordance with wage and hour.
Great, thank you. Okay, so now I will turn it over to Ms. Friedel to talk about P&L.
Hi, thank you, Ms. Seidel. So P&L met on Monday, October 5th at 6 p.m. We did go a little out of order because one of the items on the agenda was the waiver of regulation 2340 field trip. So Mr. Davis from High School East was there to talk to us about the trip. And as exciting as our meeting was, we wanted to give him the option of not having to stay for the entire meeting. So I will start with that. So the senior trip to Orlando for both of our high school, West and East, is scheduled. And it will require students to miss 3 days of school who attend the trip. So we, as the board, are being asked to approve the waiver of this regulation. I do want to point out that the senior trips this year are pushed back later in the year. So East trip is scheduled for June 3rd through June 7th. And High School West is from the May 18th to May 22nd. And this was done with COVID in mind, trying to push it out as far as it could go to give these students the best opportunity to be able to attend. Mr. Davis also informed us of a new insurance travel insurance that is available to parents. It is optional, it's not required, but it would provide 100% cancellation due to a CDC travel ban or a state or local shutdown. I'm sorry, Dr. Malash, is that the basic insurance or is that the optional insurance?
That's the basic insurance.
Okay, sorry. So that is
That's
the
okay.
basic insurance. And then there's an optional insurance that would provide 75% reimbursement for emergencies that might arise to prevent a student from attending the trip. So that was an option for parents. A question was asked if there were scholarships available to students to attend the trip, and East, I believe, does not have a scholarship, but West does have a scholarship that was set up by a family in memory of a former West alumni.
Correct.
Okay. Okay, so then to go back to the beginning of the agenda, Dr. Malash provided an update on the state budget. So the state budget for 2020-2021, which if you recall, was a two-part budget. There was a 3-month and then a 9-month. So the 9-month has been approved, and the good news is that we did not lose any more money than we had been informed that we were losing. So Mrs. Sugars and the administration had accounted for that deduction, and nothing further needed to be addressed. We also were informed that we did receive all of the full payments from the township to date, so that was some more good news. We then moved into the anti-racism policy, and I want to just share that the administration, the teachers, that committee worked really hard. We've been given some feedback over the last couple of meetings, and we were presented with a draft that is being shared with the board now, that took all of those ideas and put them into a policy. We thought it was very important that in the policy, it addressed the historical and current issues of racism that our communities are facing. We did have conversation about LGBTQ community, and the conversation kind of ended up with that may need to be a separate document. It would not be part of the anti-racism document based on the definition of racism. We gave a few more, some feedback, talking about intentional on the words that we select in the policy. We want to make sure there's no unintentional consequences. And we just all thought that we wanted to applaud the district on this necessary and important work for all of our community, our staff, our parents, our children, everybody who's walking through the door. So our appreciation to that. We also had a discussion about the high school start time. Several of us have high school students and know people who have high school students. And for the remote and portion, high school has been from 9:30 to 2:30. And we were just recognizing that the students seem to be doing better with the later start time, which medically there is, background support to support this. So one of the things we discussed with Dr. Malash was, when we go to the hybrid schedule, is there a way to keep the high school schedule the 9:30 to 2:30, understanding that it may need conversations with the transportation and other parties, but if that was something that we could look at. We also talked about a larger conversation coming into play regarding the start time when it is not COVID related. And Dr. Malash presented us with some information on a study that was done a few years ago. He had indicated that the DOE over the course of a few years have asked for pilot districts, but I guess they haven't gotten enough pilot districts to pilot the implementation. But it was something that we thought would be good to look at some data, the historical reasons for the change in start time Dr. Malash shared. But we thought it would be good to just look at some data to see, are we having the results of adding the extra half hour to the high school day? And is it something that we would like to look at as a board at addressing further? The other thing that we discussed was Dr. Malash, we worked on a calendar for the rest of the year with different topics that we will discuss going forward in our committee meetings. Dr. Malash, is there anything I missed?
I think you did a pretty comprehensive review of that meeting, Ms. Friedel. And it was we went a good 64, 65 minutes, I think. But I think you encapsulated the heart of the discussion that took place. And the only thing you already mentioned, there was a big piece of the agenda. The only thing that's on the work session tonight, and there's no action to be taken, but it will be listed for the first official reading, is the anti-racism policy. So it is accessible. We encourage people to take a look at it. A lot of voices, a lot of perspective went into the crafting and the drafting of this document. And from the discussion at the committee meeting, it lines up with what we believe in the school district is this is such an incredibly important piece of the work that we are doing, and something that I am adamant that we need to continue to move forward. So please make sure you take a look at it, go through. It's listed in the agenda under the work session, under 15.2, first reading of policy.
Great. Committee members, is there anything you'd like to add? Okay. Any questions? Mrs. Neary?
It's just one question, and thank you for that very extensive readout. Regarding the start times, and if we're discussing, maybe even looking at a later start time for high school, is there a possibility, and I know childcare has always come up, and I'm sure it would come up again, switching it where the younger students are starting earlier, since anecdotally I can say that at least mine, they peter out in the afternoon, where my older children are just getting going for their day. Is that something we would consider or even look at? And that's probably a question for Dr. Malash, but it came to mind in looking at the high school start time.
Yes, we didn't go too deep into the start time piece, but we certainly could wade back into that, you know, and if you're looking at, if we as a district are looking at making a change to one level, just based on transportation, it makes sense to change at least 2 at a time, if not all 3 at a time, the way that we currently operate our transportation program. But definitely for discussion, for sure.
Okay, thank you.
Mrs. Matlack?
Thank you. So did the committee come to a consensus on the start time, like to bring it to the full board for discussion, or is this just a discussion that's happening?
So the first part, we asked to get some information regarding the 9:30 for the hybrid. So we will get that information, I guess, from Dr. Malash and the team. And I guess the question for the board is, do we want to bring this to a discussion to the board about looking into the start time?
So procedurally, if the committee were to recommend that we have a conversation, the committee would need to recommend that we have a conversation as a full board, correct?
Yes.
In coordination with administration.
Yes.
Right.
So we are not there at this meeting, but we can certainly circle back to that in November. And as a committee, decide if we want to have a full discussion.
Thank you.
I agree, Mrs. Friedel.
Okay. Mr. Goodwin.
I just wanted to jump in because I think we did, I guess as a committee, we did ask for just for the hybrid portion to see if it would make sense to continue with the same schedule for the high school. And I believe the middle school and elementary schools are already starting a little bit earlier and ending a little bit earlier on the remote schedule. And the question is, could we look into, is it possible to kind of carry that through as long as we're on the hybrid or the COVID related schedule? But this would not have any impact at all on once we go beyond COVID, unless the board takes that up as for further discussion.
Correct. They were like two parallel conversations.
Great. Thank you for clarifying that. I don't see any other hands. Okay, so that means I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Avadia to talk to us about the Strategic Planning Committee meeting.
Yes, thank you, Mrs. Seidel. So this was exciting that we had planned the work. Mrs. Sugars really had stewarded us through that, and now we were going to work the plan. So we got together October 6th for about 90 minutes to talk about what we felt was one of the most important conversations, and that's timing and packaging bonds. You know, up to now we haven't had a direct timeline and or a sense of what types of bonds we were necessarily looking at. So we wanted to look at both of those. We were joined by some really good high-level partners of ours. Bob Garrison from Garrison Architects, our architect of record. Tony Solomon from our bond counsel, Wilentz, and Sherry Tracy from Phoenix Advisors, our financial advisor. And so I'm going to tell you what we talked about. And as per the board's request, there's a couple things we're bringing forward to kind of think about, although there's no like official action. But the first news was good. Bob Garrison's been through 17 of our 19 school buildings in his months with the district. He is on pace to have his first pass complete this month, as he had said. We asked him, in getting acclimated, what kind of leapt to mind. And one of the things that he noted is that we've got 750,000 square feet of roofing going out of warranty in the next 3 to 5 years. He did say that in his time in the district, in the buildings, that the principals are sort of superstars, receptive to the visits. They want to help, they want to be part, they want to lead their communities as part of the team to just do better for everyone. And he said, you know, that local leadership you have is going to be critical to doing everything that you want to do. He spoke about Department of Ed, school facilities, office being much more delayed in a COVID world than previous. It was previously realistic to think about a 90-day turnaround for project review. It's much closer to a 6 to 9 month timeline today. And given the scope of what we need to do and the demands on that department, that's something we really need to think about with timing, and I'm going to get to that in specific a little bit later. Tony talked about how bond referendum is the most advantageous for the district financially, and essentially we went through why, and part of it is that, and these numbers I think people know, but we're eligible for 40% reimbursements from the state, which they've been currently funding at 85%. So it's not 40, but it's still 34%, which we don't get in other methods quite as much. And then we talked about there are 4 days a year you can go out for referendum, and then there's the November election cycle, which is always included. It was Tony that really picked up the ball on P3, P3 being public-private partnership. When he had presented to the Alternative Funding Committee, there had not been regulations on that. It was just something that was coming. Those regulations were released in April. The idea at the end is that you have a 30-year lease payment, you know, with another entity. And he said that there's some real concerns about thinking about P3 when it comes to doing a lot of funding that way. One of them is that you're paying off P3, you know, leasing out of your operational budget, which has very, very real cap and therefore very, very real problems in fitting in. He said that where it's, you know, there have been no schools that have done it. There's no one we know that's pursuing it on the school level in actuality. Tony said that when it comes to P3, where that really works is where there's a revenue stream involved, not a school district, but something like a transit project, where there's going to be some revenue involved. We did spend some time talking about 5-year capital leases. It's not how we're going to fund what we need to do, but there could be pieces that could work in a 5-year capital lease. We spent maybe more time on what's called ESIPs, Energy Saving Improvement Program. Bob complimented the district on 2 levels here. The first one was that we had taken advantage of a free audit by the Board of Public Utilities Clean Energy Program, which had identified about $3 million of projects where this ESIPs could be an alternative funding mechanism. So that was good news. He also said the district has on their own gotten very good at replacing lighting with LED, which is, you know, energy efficient, and there's money savings in that. But that's something we've done without outside consultants, but we've done well in Bob's estimation. Sherry talked about current interest rates. So just interesting to know, and I had no idea, when we went out for the last bond, we were looking at a projected rate of almost 4%. Current rates are 2%. So there is sort of this idea that the sooner we could get out there to borrow money, we would do it at more attractive rates. We talked again about the state, sort of rebate on projects. Let's see here. Yeah, we did talk about like thinking about the full scope of projects and then pieces that could be, that could be addressed in different ways. And it was at this point that we really addressed an interesting idea, which was we've got to figure out where our comprehensive work timeline is going. But there is a possibility, especially with Bob's comment on the roofs, that there would be something that we could do at some point before our comprehensive date. If it were specific, smaller, package. Now, we're not ready as a committee to make any kind of recommendation like that because we need to give Garrison the time to complete their assessment and to make recommendations. But just enough to note today that when I talk about the timeline I'm about to talk about, that's sort of for me the only caveat. But anyway, Mrs. Sugars, and I think, so I guess everyone of our experts, internal and external on this committee, agreed with the following statement. We can't do the big comprehensive work and go out for referendum to the public anytime before March 2022. We just can't do it. We can't get there. If we were to get there, we would need to have finality in the projects by this coming June. That doesn't feel particularly realistic. So if that's out, the next possible date we could possibly go to the public is September 2022. And I believe that's kind of where our current recommendation, our expert recommendation is headed. When I mentioned March 2022, the experts kind of all said, look, you know, it's possible. It's possible. But there was more confidence interval on the September 2022. But what I want the committee, or no, I'm sorry, I want the full board now to understand is that means your first big tranche of work, our first tranche of work, would happen in summer of 2023. So all that to say, that's where that conversation kind of ended up at the committee level, and we said we would bring it to this level for discussion. Okay. There are a lot of people, it turns out, who want to do schoolwork right now. We're not prepared to do that work, but just so you know, construction in schools has a big appetite from people looking for work. And then we talked about, well, we did talk to Garrison about getting some specific case studies about schools, sections of schools, and how we could best proceed. What's a priority? What are our options in kind of creating some good structures based on what's happening? And then I think I asked about, you know, how should we be thinking about November? And there was definitely consensus by our panel of experts that the money we're saving by having a November referendum would be very much outweighed by the fact that it would come in a sea of other issues where we really need our schools and our communities to focus on what we're asking and what we're presenting as our vision for these schools. So we did address it explicitly. There didn't seem to be a great argument for November, but there were several arguments against. And that's it. As we kind of approach we agreed at the end, I think, you know, as sort of a committee overall, that we did want to bring to the full board the need for a referendum. You know, that's the mechanism where we can get the big vision done. That we do need, you know, we do need a lot of people on that team, including the school communities and, you know, local leadership, you know, our central leadership, board members to be part of that, the PTA structure. But I think one of the big pieces for us is to kind of get perspectives of the board. I mean, September 2022 is sort of what seems to be possible. It's still aggressive. It's still aggressive. But I don't know that we can do anything confidently before that. That's not, as I said, specific and explicitly recommended by Bob Garrison. And that's it. Bob said, you know, he's feeling confident about it all. He's going to join us for the balance of strategic planning meetings. And you know, this next month we'll get together November 4th at 7 p.m. and we're addressing a couple favorites: new versus rehabbing schools, and that first pass that we are going to get from Garrison Architects. That will really put a lot of meat into our discussion. And so, you know, that was the meeting. And I don't know if anyone on the committee has anything to add, or well, let's start there. Mrs. Matlack.
Sherry Tracy mentioned something that that I thought was something that is worth mentioning to the rest of the board when she was talking about selling the bonds. You know, yes. That they didn't necessarily need to be sold all at once, and to stagger the sale of the bonds would lessen the tax impact on our community. So that's just something that I think we also need to consider when we're talking about bonds and projects and possible, size and things like that. Because for me, that knowing that, opened up, some possibilities, I thought.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. Mrs. Neary.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with Carol, and that's something I think we can try to articulate and make sure is clear to the community regarding the tax impact up front and what we can do, knowing that this is an investment for the long term. Bob Garrison was very to the point. He was very forthright in his assessment and being our partner through this process and talking about, the conversation around new construction versus rehabilitation and having those difficult conversations and getting it, out in the open, the choices that were made over the years and where that's left us and the conversations that, we're going to have, not just within the committee, but as a full board about what we need to do to reconcile some of that now. And then also, I think we had on there, Ben, looking at the demographic study, and are there any changes that we're seeing now that could be impactful or shift anything in that conversation? Those were just some of the things I had noted.
Yeah, that's a good point too. So right now, it doesn't seem like we have a narrative for not needing 19 buildings. So we addressed that, but I think, yeah, I think there's a lot of questions like that that are inextricably linked with some of the things that are coming up. Miss Friedel.
Sorry. So with the idea of September 2022, when does the work start? And I mean the pre-work, like we need to talk to the community, right? We need to assess where the community is as it relates to a bond. What are they looking at? What are they comfortable with? What are the needs? So when would that work begin to get us to a September 2022?
Yeah, let me pivot that to Dr. Malash and Mrs. Sugars. I certainly have ideas, but they're the experts.
Tomorrow.
It has already begun.
I was just going to say that now.
Yeah, I think, Ben and I had spoken about kind of outlining a plan to get us there, because obviously it's a tremendous amount of work that has to be done. And we decided that, the first step really is to determine the date, and then you kind of work backwards from the date. But I think that, we need to have those difficult conversations that Mrs. Neary spoke of. And we have, if you look at the outline of the topics that we want to cover over the next couple months, we really would start to, in March, really start to look at, I think honing in on what the projects would be, sort of starting to put that process together. Because if we're going to go for a September referendum, our project applications would need to be in by January. So really you'd be talking like a March to December timeline of garnering that information.
And possibly even a little bit before January, I would say before the first of the year. The biggest challenge becomes, right, what's it look like at the state level, where they have a facilities department that has been hit by retirement and folks that have left, and it just has not been replaced. After we get the approvals, we have to let the county know 60 days prior to the vote. So if we're doing a vote in September, then it's July that we have to make that announcement and put all that kind of stuff together. I agree. There's a level of intensity that needs to take place, that needs to be embraced, and honestly needs to be focused upon. There is, and I think one of the things we talked about, and I think we're going to hear from Bob, is that look at, so here's what the state of the buildings are, here's what the options are. We have an idea about what needs to be done when you talk about infrastructure, within the buildings. And I think those are the pretty serious areas of focus. I think Mr. Abadi did a great job of putting it all together, what the professionals talked about, and really capturing what the discussion was, among the board members and the professionals that evening with what took place. So an invigorating discussion. 2 years is going to go very, very quickly, as we look at it. And you look at, we are almost 2 full years out from the 2018 referendum that went down. That time goes and goes, so.
I have a quick question. Is there a way that we can incorporate some of that guidance that Mike McClure gave us last night on some of what he has found has worked, regarding the surveys and getting some of that out there as soon as possible, that we could bring the feedback then back into the committee?
Yes, absolutely, Ms. Sneering. So last night, for the folks that are watching at home or watching online, on Monday night, on the 12th of October, we had a board retreat. We did not have a large group that was watching at that time, but the board, we were fortunate to have Mr. Mike McClure. He's the president of the New Jersey School Boards Association, the state association that represents all the school boards. So he joined us virtually, for the discussion. Mike, and he's the board president currently in Maple Shade. He's been involved in 4 separate successful referenda that have taken place in that community. So he gave some very good insight and some suggestions. And yes, Ms. Neary, absolutely. Some of the advice and the guidance that he provided for us. I think some of that is, in working with, as we were with Mr. Garrison and his firm, about starting to put that and package that together. And Mike didn't talk about it. Garrison's the one, in Maple Shade passed their $50 million referendum 2 years ago. Garrison's the architect. They're the ones that they worked with. They're the ones that they're currently working with. We've got some great resources that have seen success in what they've done.
Yeah. Mrs. Neary, I'm glad you brought that up, because I was also going to say something similar, that I think we got some valuable advice last night from Mr. McClure, and just in my head thinking about, they recently did a $50 million bond for 4 schools.
Yes.
Right. So sort of extrapolate that out as to our needs, and we really have to think. Really big when we're planning this. At least that's my perspective, because as we all see, the timeline is so long. I mean, we really have to plan for really far out and being able to hit a lot of the things that are going to come down the pipe. So I was really thankful that he was able to share a lot of that expertise with us last night. So,
and that goes back actually, Lisa, to what Carol was saying regarding the selling of the bonds. So that as an option versus having to say go out to bond multiple times, where that could be challenging, right? Challenging for the community, for us, and that was, and that's where it tied in, and that's the piece I forgot. Where you could then you could go out to bond at once, even if it's for a larger dollar value, but then hold back the selling of those bonds to lessen that, and then that way you really do have a good strategic plan for your building. So I just wanted to make that clarification as well.
Great. Thank you. I think Ruth did. Oh, sorry.
I was going to say Ms. Schultz.
Yeah, I did. I was just curious if there was any discussion. I do have 2 questions. Was there any discussion at the meeting in regards to doing, 2 or 3 or even 4 smaller bonds before to I guess speed up the timeline? Because I guess that's one, just as a way to get started on the work faster than the time frame you outlined. And then the second was anything discussed or mentioned about, I know we've talked a lot about P3 partnerships, but the appetite and what that appetite looks like for P3 partnerships right now in this environment. Again, just kind of going back to a way to speed up work. Then I think you said, was it roughly 2023 would be when we even start to be able to chunk away at this work? Are we what would our plan be in the next 3 years if we had a lot of major stuff start to go wrong in these buildings? I mean, that's quite a ways away. So I was just curious if there was any type of discussion in regards to, breaking the bond and then packaging that story up front to the community. And then again, back to what does the appetite for P3 look like now, given the environment of COVID? I know that one's tougher. I just didn't know if that discussion had come up or if anybody had known that information.
So yeah, so actually, so Carol had kind of brought that very idea up, and I think in the context of the adrenaline of that meeting, a lot of us were thinking, you know, is there something that could be cordoned off early to get us started on projects we know need to happen? The problem is we're not really ready for it. In other words, ready to think about it, but that presentation from Garrison next month is going to be critical, because if it's one thing, the feeling was it's got to be something that's true across buildings, but that's a common problem. And so roofing came up, you know, kind of in their first, you know, in their first thoughts. They're thinking, look, all this stuff's coming out of warranty. There's some work that needs to be done. And, you know, and what does it mean to have leaky roof? So, you know, that kind of stuff. But I think we need more of the nitty gritty from Garrison. But I agree with you. Summer 2023 sounds pretty far off. I think, you know, even for something that was new, we discussed, like, let's say we could in January or February have some kind of plan for something, you know, early stage. Even still, Mrs. Sugars, that would still put us on summer of 2022, right?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think we did discuss these different options, and again, timing is everything. So making sure that you're doing this in a way that, you know, we're tentatively planning on doing some roofing work at Stockton. You know, we'll have that together, probably bid in January for summer work. You know, it's the timeline. The sooner you can do it, the better pool of contractors you have, and the more runway you have before you start the project. So timing is everything.
Now, the other thing to think about is that we do have some funds. I mean, there are things we're going to need to address before summer 2022. I think administration would back me up on that. And so we'd have to be very judicious about that. Ms. Friedel?
Has Garrison been able, I know there's been so many setbacks because of the building closures. Has Garrison been able to complete their visits to each of the schools and do an assessment, or is that still ongoing?
So they visited 17. They're going to be through all 19 this month and have a preliminary report for us to look at in November. So I would say they're fairly in place. Mrs. Sugars would know, but they're in place as of, I want to say, earlier this year.
Yes, they've been, one of the advantages of being closed is that they have had an opportunity to get in and spend some time in our buildings. Also, we had just recently done the energy audit, which we had talked about that night, and that was a tremendous help to them because it cataloged all of the HVAC system in all of our buildings. So that was a big help as well. So I know for a fact he was actually in buildings yesterday. So I expect that December, January, we should be able to start having some really good conversations.
I think if the full board is okay with us putting September 2022 in, I think that maybe offline we can work on, or administration can present to us kind of what the pieces of that timeline are, because I do have a feeling, as Dr. Melange says, that time's going to go quickly, and we got to make sure, because as far off as it sounds, I can live with it if it's the best we can do. It's much harder to live with trying to get into 2024 to start these projects. And I mean, off the top of my head, I would guess 5-6 years. Ms. Sugars probably would have a much better idea, but from the time we start to the time we finish the projects that are likely going to be included, I've got to believe it's a 6-year process. Does that sound somewhat right?
Yeah, I think that's pretty much what we had discussed, with the original bond referendum. There's the projects are, lots of projects. You try to do as much as you can in the summers. The summers aren't as long as they seem. So yes, I think we will be an orchestration to get it done in the manner, all the work done in the timeline that we would have. But yeah, you're probably definitely looking at 5 to 6 years.
I agree. Mr. Goodwin?
So did you discuss, I thought you said you discussed something about the lease purchase. That's not an option for us here for any of the work that we're looking at?
I think the way it was left is that it could be it could be something, but not something all encompassing. So it could work for a piece of one building and one project. That's where I think we left it. But Mr. Sugars, did you have a different thought of that?
Yeah, I was just gonna say that lease purchase, when you're looking at lease purchasing, you're looking at a 5-year timeline. And you're also looking at making this out of your the payment comes out of your operational budget. And there's no state aid advantage to doing it that way. It certainly could be used if you were in a crisis situation, you didn't have capital reserve funds, you need to replace a roof. You know, that might be the type of situation where you would look at a 5-year lease type program. It's really, I think, probably geared for smaller districts with smaller projects. I don't think it's really going to be an option for us. I think, you know, we've been fortunate that we've had some decent levels of capital reserve funds that we've been able to use. I think that would probably more likely be our route than going through a lease purchase type situation.
What did we use lease purchase for before? I thought we had some lease purchase items in our budget from before that we recently paid off. Is that true or not true?
I believe boilers and lights.
Yeah.
Mrs. Ridgway might know.
Yeah, there was boiler projects that you had done years ago through when the ROD grants were still available. And I think, so the ROD grant funding came from the state and then the local funding had come through a lease purchase.
Right,
Yes,
okay.
that was years ago, yes.
Yeah, okay, all right. So none of that exists today. It would be, everything would be out of the operating budget today with no matching funds from the state.
No matching funds from the state, unfortunately.
Which, Mr. Goodman, is one of the challenges, you know, and again, that Mr. Salamini talked about with P3, you know, with the public-private partnerships, you know, that when it comes time for the district to be paying their piece into it, that comes out of the operational budget. It does not come, there's no cost benefit from the state, you know, in sharing it, but it literally comes out of the operational budget, which and depending upon the size of the project, if you're taking that out of the operational budget, that has an effect on being able to spend other money that's there.
Right, okay.
I guess the only other thing to say is that I don't think we know how many questions or how many times we'd go. I think what we want to get to tonight is, you know, can we slot in this date that we've talked about and create a project plan? But realistically, I mean, if we have 3 questions and 1 goes, you know, those other 2 questions, I believe they'll all have to be essential projects. So we'll have to circle back too. So, and then there's that option. So we need a little bit more time on kind of like that early term one. And we need to get our head around all of this, which the good news is Garrison's on their way. But for tonight, I think that, you know, this is the question ahead of us. Can we do this? And yeah, Mr. Good.
I just wanted to kind of pick up on one other item. Like I know Mike from our discussion yesterday, one of the things he mentioned was the idea, and I think we've done some of this, but the idea of number one, going out to kind of surveying the public, because I wonder, like part of that whole last thing we went through, we had all those questions. Do we really want to have 3 questions or can we just have 1? Do you want to do it or do you?
Yeah.
I mean, it's like we had all these 3 questions and I don't know if it benefited or didn't benefit. It's like, but maybe we should, maybe that's a survey thing, because personally, you know, the work needs to be done. I understand it. If the public understood it, maybe it's just a question of yes or no. Do you want to do this or do you not want to do this? As opposed to, I know maybe I'm not sure what the best way is, but I just wonder if it's just put it out there. This is all the stuff that's going to happen. And if we could kind of get a group of folks that really understands all those needs, to help them understand the needs at an individual level for the schools, and then come up with a question. Do you want to do it or not? As opposed to the 3 questions. If you answer this, then I mean, I don't know. That's something I think you should at least consider as you move forward.
I think it was Dr. I'm not sure who said it, but I think it was Dr. Malash who said we need to start tomorrow or something. But the reality is we don't have a good recent baseline of data. And the reality is I know it was 3 questions. You know, everyone on this call knows it was 3 questions. You know, but how do we get like a new baseline of data? I guess the one we reviewed with Judy Wilson, that was surveys out of December.
Oh, it was like January 2019, wasn't it?
Yeah, well,
the surveys with Judy were September, October, November. where the focus groups, the surveys actually launched, I believe, late November, early December, and then from December into that first week in January. I think they closed after the first of the year.
We also did work with her with the ad hoc committee, and I can tell you anecdotally that definitely there was a desire for simplification. They may not have said only do one question, but definitely make it clear, make it understandable, and make it simple. So we can definitely go back and take a look at some of that information as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was that feeling was echoed in the Safety and Security Committee meeting as well. In really educating the public on the needs and simplifying the message for people to more easily understand what the needs are.
Right.
Could we do, just as an early indicator, even something as early, as next month? I know it's kind of hard because we are going to go out to have parents review for, the hybrid and coming back on the 9th, but getting an early indicator in a thought exchange or something like that to get a feel for what parents are thinking, and other community members are thinking right now regarding our buildings and the bond process and so on, just to give a feel and have a data point as we begin to develop even just our timelines.
We can, yeah, absolutely. We have the wherewithal to do it. We can talk about timing, and what that looks like, but to set it up, we certainly can set that up.
Okay, great.
Yeah, that seemed to be Mike from yesterday. That seemed to be part of it, is that as they started to even think about developing it and making the case, because the case in one sense we've kind of made, but we need to, that's going to be integral to making this case is the current state of buildings. The only thing I wonder though is, well, a couple things. One, if we're going to try to do something in the nearer term, we would know in the next few months. But the other thing is the COVID effect. I don't know. I don't know what I don't think there's a right answer to it per se, but we know that if we discuss governance, one person watches, and if we discuss return to learn, 1,200 people watch. So it's just one of those things that that is a huge thing. However, I think we need to get out there early and figure out what comes back and do time studies over time, let's say. But yeah, community pulse is going to be critical and iterative. So I think that's a good idea.
Yeah, and I would agree, Ben, with that. I do think that we have to sort of cue it up though, because everything that we've talked about tonight is all facilities based. It doesn't even hit on curriculum or reformatting classrooms for the next century.
Right.
And so I think we have to create the framework to lay the baseline for people to answer those questions, because if not, then what we're going to get back is, I don't want roofs, I want, and we need roofs. We must have a lot of these facility things. So I think that there has to be some education before the survey goes out, which we did the last time, and it might not have been as effective as we had hoped, but I do think that there is some communication work we have to do first before we survey the community, or we're not going to get back data that is really going to be useful to move forward, in my opinion.
Ms. Friedel?
So one of my thoughts too is, before we move too far, is that community piece. And currently, we really can't open up the schools. Like, one of the things we talked about last night was, showing people what the schools look like. Personally, I've been in 3 or 4 schools that I know well because my children have attended there. And I've been in other schools, but maybe only in the entryway or only in the multi-purpose room. And we are at a disadvantage now because of COVID. You can't just bring people into the building. So is there a way that in some of this pre-work that maybe we can work with our IT people and do some virtual tours? I think that seeing, and the virtual piece actually might reach more people, because you might have 7 people who come out to the actual tour, but you may have 700 people who will do the virtual tour of the school. So I just throw that out there because I think, the saying, a picture is worth 1,000 words.
That sounds like a great idea.
Yeah.
Sounds like a great idea. I mean, I don't know how much it would cost, but I know like the realtors or have special photographers that they use for doing like the tours when you're selling your home. So I'm wondering if that sounds like an excellent idea, Ms. Friedel. I mean, that seems like that could really, and we could have it on our website, and people can look at it at will,
Right. And then we have a lot of people in the community who don't go to the schools. They're either their children have graduated, so they're not in the schools, or they don't have children, or their children haven't, entered the schools. So that virtual piece, I think, may just reach a greater part of our community. So, the schools are for everyone, no matter what your usage of them is. So
virtual piece could bridge that gap too, that the people that disconnect themselves because they're not involved in schools,
Can I just add too, I agree with the virtual piece and going through. A good place for folks to start would be to go to the website. There is a button when you scroll down on the website that says bond referendum. Just find the actual name of it. It says bond progress and funding for Cherry Hill Public Schools. In there, on the left-hand side, says school building improvements updates. So during the 2019-2020 cycle of our committee meetings and through the board meetings, Mrs. Sugars did presentations at all the BNF meetings where it goes through the age of the buildings. There's pictures of the facilities. It talks about work that needs to be done, work that has been done. But I would encourage folks to go through. There was some, like we started in October last year, and Ms. Sugars presented Barclay, Barton, and Bret Hart, and then finished up High School East was the last building in June. But you can see the slideshow that goes through for each one of them that identifies, like I say, what work has been done, how old the school is, what the current enrollment is, and what work needs to be done, the future needs are all listed in there. And some good pictures about the current conditions. There's pictures of bathrooms, there's pictures of the floors, there's pictures of the hallways, pictures of the old doors, that kind of stuff. So a great place to start to get an idea, because that's got the information that's in those slideshows, for the most part, that has not changed and will not change until we do the referendum.
So is there an opportunity to bring that to a more prominent place on the website, and perhaps in one of our weekly communications with the community, we can start to, suggest that people start looking at that in advance of some of these deeper conversations, just to make it easier to find?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I was just going to suggest that if we could, just let the community know that the board has started discussions about, the major projects that we're going to have to do, and we want the community to start thinking about that along with us, and that there's a great resource, and point them to it where they can, take a look at what our schools are like right now, and start thinking along with us about what we will need to come up with.
Mrs. Tong, do you have your hand up over there? Sally, I think I see your hand.
Yes, I do have something to add on about the photography of the video. Since we have the new architectural, the garrison, could we also update them, giving us some pictures or whatever they find is necessary for us to make the bond, or for them, like show it to other people, more photos of the updated one that need to be done? I guess need to repair, or what could be the that wasn't caught up on the first time?
Sally,
So are you asking, is Garrison taking pictures as they're going along?
I'm trying to say that if we can also ask Garrison to update us with the new, I guess if there's new things that we have not captured the first time with the old architect, but update with us a new one that he captured that we did not get the first round. And so we could add it to our, you know, to the updated bound referendum coming up. Does that make sense? I don't know. I think I'm trying to express.
Mrs. Sugars, would that be included in the report they're going to give in December? It would be any new
Yes.
issues?
Absolutely. Yep, they're going through all the buildings. They have reviewed the information that we used with the bond referendum last time, but they are also looking at the buildings with a fresh pair of eyes and from a different perspective. So I anticipate that when they give us their reports, that they will highlight things maybe that we didn't consider in the first round.
Yes. Okay. Yep. That's what I'm trying to say. Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Sugar, and thank you for everybody input.
So Mrs. Sugars, weren't they also, as part of their deep dive, they were looking at all the work that's been done over the years? So the last bond, even some work prior to that, like it's a comprehensive look and what we had proposed to do in the last bond, if I wasn't mistaken, right? That's what they were
Correct.
looking at and going through. Okay, I just want to make sure I had that right.
The other thing I wanted to add, if we're going to start, sharing the information with the community to start thinking about this, is one thing that Mike said last night that really stuck out to me, and I had started in my notebook here, is, you really have to remind or constantly message that when you invest in schools, you invest in your community. And I really liked the way that he presented that message, and I really feel like we need to start to take that and turn it into sort of our message and start sharing that with the community as we start to, put tidbits of what we're working on out there, because that's an absolutely true statement. It's a benefit for everybody that lives in the community if we, move forward with upgrading our schools and maintaining our home values. And so everybody that lives in Cherry Hill wins when that happens. And I think that that's an important message that we have to constantly reiterate.
And yeah, I mean, I think that's very well said. I like the idea that he said about, we're not at the stage now, but eventually to do an open meeting at council and just have it be a public meeting where people can, so they see that we're all aligned in terms of a great Cherry Hill. And I think it's an important point that Lisa's making now, or Mrs. Seidel is making now, which is, we don't want money from the community. That's not the goal here, right? We want to keep and make Cherry Hill a great place to live, to learn, to play, to be, to raise a family. I think we got to be careful about how much of this is deficit mentality and everything's falling apart versus great learning's happening every day. But we believe in the vibrancy of this community and that, schools are at the heart of it. And, we bring a couple hearts of the community. I don't remember how often we award that, but, that's a great, so you really bring everything good that's happening. But, we owe our students, great schools, and, there's a lot of deferred maintenance. It's not a story of collapse. It's a story of we need to reinvest. And I think phrasing it that way and feeling that way about it is going to be important versus, how can we, we need to go back. We're looking forward, but what do we want? And then, in one sense, I almost see the slogan of like, we need to, for tomorrow and for tomorrow's tomorrow, we need to get together and be aligned on this. So, and then, we can ask, we have some good time here for, one of the things that Garrison said is, our leaders of our buildings and the people who work there, they're not dispassionate about this. They're very invested in helping us come up with solutions. How do we mobilize them in the next 9 months to get really good, direct feedback and data and be part of this and to feel part of this? Because at the end of it, we talked about Eggs Benedict, we talked about Ponzios, but the reality is everyone here, we're going to need you, and we're going to need to be on the same page. So, I think we're headed towards something exciting, and I think there's a lot of good work that administration, especially Mrs. Sugars, has done to kind of get us here. So I look forward to, moving forward on this with you guys.
Yeah. Very well said. And you know, Ben, you hit on something. The leaders of our buildings are the experts of their buildings, right? I mean, they're the ones that are living in it every day and know what the needs are. So I think that's a really great strategy and a really great idea.
Agree.
Okay. Thank you. Ms. Sugars, anything to add as we kind of close out this section?
Oh, I think we covered it.
All right, thanks.
All right, well, thank you, everybody. That were great committee readouts and great discussion. And that now moves us into our special action agenda. So I will kick that off. So the superintendent recommends, and I move the following. Under curriculum and instruction, item 1, approval of attendance at conference and workshops for the 2020-21 school year. Item 2, approval of special education settlement agreement. Mrs. Matlack, can I have a second?
Yes, I second that.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? Please raise your hand. Okay, seeing none, Mrs. Sugars.
All right, I will open up the online voting for board members. And we have a unanimous vote.
Great. Okay, next, the superintendent recommends and I move the following. Item 1, approval of bill lists. Item 2, resolutions. And item 3, approval of Cherry Hill, McKinney, Vento, DCP&P students going out of district for the 2019-2020 school year. Mrs. Schultz, could I have a second?
I second.
Thank you. Any questions? Please raise your hand. Okay, seeing none, Mrs. Sugars.
All right, so I'm opening up the online voting.
Mrs. Sugars, I need to abstain to Henry Schein on the bill list. This is Mrs. Schultz.
Okay, thank you. Okay, and other than the exception of Mrs. Schultz, we have a unanimous vote.
Okay, great. Next, the superintendent recommends and I move the following. Item 1, termination of employment certificated. Item 2, termination of employment non-certificated. Item 3, appointments certificated. Item 4, appointments non-certificated. Item 5, assignment salary change non-certificated. And item 6, other compensation certificated. Mrs. Schultz, could I have a second?
I second.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? Please raise your hand. Okay, seeing none, Mrs. Sugars.
Okay. And I'm opening up the online voting. And we have a unanimous vote.
Okay. The superintendent recommends and I move the following. Item 1, second reading of policies. Item 2, approval of waiver of regulation 2340 field trips. Mrs. Friedel, could I have a second?
I second.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? Please raise your hand. Okay, seeing none, Mrs. Sugars.
Okay, the online voting is open. And it's a unanimous vote.
Great, thank you. We don't have any items to vote on for strategic planning tonight, so that will move us into our second public comment. The second public comment period is for any other topic. When submitting your public comment via email for the second public comment period, please indicate in the email subject line, second public comment item, and you may submit those items to lshugars@chclc.org.
Our first comment comes from Jeff Podowitz. First, a post on New Jersey Education Aid dated October 8, 2020, entitled 2021 Equalized Valuations Show Economic Trends, Forecast State Aid Changes. Both Voorhees and Collingswood are mentioned. If you care about how certain parameters influence the state aid to education formula, this is a very interesting article. For comparison, growth in equalized valuation tax 2020 to 2021, the statewide average is 2.3%. The average for Camden County is 2.7%. For Cherry Hill, it is 4.5%. Note for Cherry Hill, the growth in aggregate assessed valuation for Cherry Hill was 1.2%. Please reference the enclosed PDF entitled Op-Ed Challenged by School Funding Do-Over dated April 3rd, 2017. It was authored by Ms. Lynn Strickland. The stated intent of the SFRA was to distribute aid to all school districts in an equitable and predictable way that considers the needs of all students, including at-risk students, limited English proficient students, and students with special needs. Many laud the SFRA as the formula in which the money follows the child, except in the SFRA, the money was never followed by the individual child eligible for special education services, nor did the designers intend it to. This is a wrong that cries for correction. Most importantly, however, is this: special education programs have a common denominator in that students in need live in every school district in New Jersey. Maybe our district can help correct the wrong. Ms. Strickland was an appointee to the New Jersey Task Force for Improving Special Education for Public School Students, 2015. She also served as chairman of the Task Force School Funding Work Group. Our next comment comes from Mindy Rosen. Many months have passed since the ERI report. I know you are addressing issues at West that were pre-ERI. Have you gone out to bid on any of the recommendations from ERI yet? If so, where? If not, why? Lauren Greenberg. Have teachers been provided training on teaching in a hybrid model? How will they handle trying to teach both the kids in person and the kids who are remote? Has additional technical equipment besides just Chromebooks been provided to the schools to help facilitate hybrid learning? Due to the lack of transparency from the district, there's a lot of misinformation floating around as well as a lot of frustration. Could you please hold a town hall with administration and parents in order to allow parents to get answers to their questions? The next one is from William Alexander. I want to take a moment to address two very special teachers that were being recognized tonight for their years of service. First, I'd like to congratulate Mr. Scott Sweeten on his 30 years of service. Mr. Sweeten served as my freshman year Earth Science STEM teacher in 1998. He was one of the first teachers to take an active interest in my education, was always finding ways to harness whatever talent and interest I had in science. I affectionately took on the title as his NASA nerd when we spent units on space travel and our solar system. But more importantly, he never forgot me during my years at Cherry Hill West. He always took the time to say hello and ask about my other classes. He was the first science teacher in memory that took the time to see his students performing in outside ventures like school concerts. Scott Sweeten has been a force at Cherry Hill West, and I always be proud to be one of his students. Secondly, more personally, I want to congratulate Mr. Jim Mark on his 20 years of service. Mr. Mark entered Cherry Hill West in 2000 during my senior year at a time where there was much uncertainty in the instrumental music program. Enrollment numbers had dropped and facilities for the instrumental music program were a bare minimum. However, he never allowed that to dim his enthusiasm as our director. His positivity combined with the no-nonsense professionalism helped to turn the department around. Now in his 20th year, the West Music Department is flourishing as a well-oiled machine on all sides, including instrumental and choral groups. This is due to his dedication to turning the department into one unified unit. I cannot tell you how proud I am as an alum to see the marching band back on the field with new uniforms. Both of these fine educators have made a huge impact on my life. It is their example that I strive by as I enter my 12th year as a public school educator. I will always be grateful for having Mr. Mark and Mr. Sweeten as teachers during my years at Cherry Hill West. The next next comment is from Ann Einhorn. I would like to acknowledge some of the educators that were mentioned tonight for their years of service. Scott Sweeten for getting my son through freshman science with dignity and patience. Shai Chunamark for his enthusiasm and dedication for his students and his patience with me as a board member. Scott Grazer for his love of music and passing his love of music to his students as well as our community. Jim Marks, who encouraged my son's enthusiasm for marching band and music, and his support of my son as he pursued an education in music education and who teaches music education today. And to Dr. Lawyer Chapman, thank you for all your years of education in our district. I also thank you for seeing our district through some tumultuous times with dignity, calm, professionalism, and grace. I hope you have a healthy retirement and have fun. I shall miss you. Ethan Stern Taubman. Cherry Hill Robotics is one of the most successful robotics teams, not in this district, not in the States, but in the entire world. Every year, many students put a huge amount of time and effort into building and programming world-class machines, creating a fun, social, and educational opportunity for anyone to participate in, as well as teaching students math and STEM skills, teaches students about robotics, a very important and well-paying job in this new technological era. You expect that the district would cherish a world-class robotics club that brings home mountains of awards every year. Seriously, we have 10-foot shelves to store them all. According to the user-friendly budget, the budget for all extracurricular activities was about $3.6 million last year. The district spends several thousand on sports every year, of which 90% of the participating students will not make sports their career. Care to guess how much they spend on robotics? Zero. That wasn't a spelling mistake, but I do know that wasn't your guess. Even with zero funding, this club was built from the ground up by an amazing volunteer club advisor and talented students, and has earned its name as one of the most competitive and respected robotics clubs on the planet. But that's about to crumble to pieces. I'm very disappointed with the way this administration has neglected this club and the students who benefit from it so much. Right now, my GPA might not help me stand out on a college application, but writing a story about how I was the lead programmer on a robotics team that went to the World Championship sure would. I remember when my team and I were a few points away from going to World Championship and comforting my teammate turned best friend while he was very upset. I remember comforting him and telling him, hey, we were so close this year, we'll definitely make it next year, champ. I see there may be no next year. Rick Short, 1002 Chelton Parkway. How can the school district and 9 school board members sit silent with a state of New Jersey DOE ventilation plan of 50 words? Seriously, it's only 50 words to protect 1.4 million students. Why is everyone remaining silent on the obvious statewide 50-word ventilation plan program? My first email to Cherry Hill Schools was on the topic of creating a written ventilation plan was sent on July 20th, 2020. I'm estimating I've sent over 18 to 22 emails on the topic of ventilation. They've been ignored, so please read out each board member's name in detail below. He then goes on to list all of the board members and say, why aren't you speaking up for a better written ventilation plan for November 2020? Why did you ignore CDC, Harvard, and Yale HVAC COVID-19 experts? Finally, I would like to take a minute and talk about an inappropriate Facebook post made on 10/8/20 made by Cherry Hill School Board member Rosie Arroyo, which he then deleted on 10/8/20. Did anyone in the district see this inappropriate Facebook post? Does anyone in the district or school board member have a comment about this inappropriate Facebook post? Miriam Stern. In the teacher thought exchange survey, 2 of the top responses indicated the teachers have not received training for hybrid learning. How many hours have been set aside to train teachers in preparation for hybrid learning, which is slated to start 11/9? This week, parents with students in the East Robotics Club find out that the advisor who has volunteered his time for the past 10 years has finalized his stepping down in the next 2 months. Because there is no stipend for the Robotics Club advisor, the club has not been able to attract a new advisor. The club will close its doors at the end of 2020 if a new advisor is not hired with stipend. Despite us parents having brought this to the administration and Board of Ed's attention during many meetings over many years, and having had a private meeting with the superintendent and assistant superintendent last year, no progress has been made. Last year, the East Robotics team won the state championship. During the state competition in March, I spoke about several other top competing teams' advisors. When I explained to one of those advisors that the East team was at risk of folding, he said that would be tragic. I think we all now can recognize the role technology and STEM play in all daily lives, including our own students' education. It's hard to make sense of why the district won't prioritize allocating a small stipend to continue this club. Further, when the district is working to improve the math learning of our students, especially those in middle and high school on the west side, what message does it send to all of our students that our district won't fund the only high school extracurricular activity that provides our students the opportunity to apply all of the STEM disciplines in a fun, competitive gamer environment? That just does not make sense and needs to be changed urgently before this club closes its doors. Our last comment, I think, Carolyn Levad. Our children will pay for this school closure for the rest of their lives, and the longer school stays closed, the higher the cost. A Penn Wharton model concludes that the benefits to our children and communities of reopening schools exceeds the cost. The paragraphs below are taken directly from their study. Education quality not only affects student test scores, it also has long-term effects on the rate at which students attend college and students' lifetime earnings. COVID-19 school closures are unprecedented, but literature on other school closures provides some estimates of long-term impacts of learning disruptions on student achievement, grade retention, and college enrollment. According to a recent study, children who have been out of the classroom due to COVID-19 closures will likely suffer permanent learning losses unless education quality is improved substantially, meaning students will not be able to catch up on lost learning when they return to the classroom. We do not attempt to quantify other benefits of in-person schooling to children's mental, social, and emotional well-being, including interaction with peers and learning cooperative skills. Another cost we do not quantify is the potential lack of child supervision amidst school closures, particularly the lower income and single-headed families. Unsupervised children are more likely to engage in negative behaviors such as substance abuse and criminality, thus incurring additional social and individual costs beyond lack of education. A 2004 study shows decreased crime, violence, and incarceration when children are in school and estimates that 1 to 2% of the male high school graduation rate costs the U.S. approximately $1.9 billion. Recent 2020 study predicts a 2 to 9% decline in graduation rates from the COVID closures. Our children will pay. Okay, let me just check my email to make sure nothing else came in. I have one more comment. Alana Sierras, I want to commend the board for tackling the topic of the high school start time. I hope the state can finally start their pilot program to see the difference in learning based on later school time for teenagers. The agenda from the board meeting to board meeting, the language continues to state, if you'd like to speak now, please identify the agenda item, speak into the microphone, and clearly state your name and address. Each speaker will be given a maximum of 3 minutes to speak. The timer on the screen behind me indicating the amount of time we have remaining. If you're going to continue to have Mrs. Sugars read public comment, maybe the agenda should be updated to reflect how public comment is being handled. Again, I will state at this meeting, as I did in the last meeting, I think it is completely unacceptable for the board secretary to read the voluminous amounts of emails that come in for public comment, some even being rude to her or other employees in the district and completely incompetent. How would you feel reading someone else's email, airing their despise of you or others you work for? How have we not transitioned to hand raising from the public so that only those actually in attendance can speak, versus now when several emails come in and public comment can drone on for up to 45 minutes, sometimes longer, because of emails that were sent at any point since the last board meeting and public comment made. Now that we've been doing virtual board meetings for 6 months, I would think that something would have changed. One more comment that just came in. Yanni Yaris, tonight the board meeting honored some incredible members of the Cherry Hill Public School family, all of which started in the district when I was a student. Many of the educators who are celebrating 20 years in the district started at Rosa and have stayed at Rosa since being hired. I think it is important to give credit to Dr. Tammy Murphy and Mr. Ed Cantonese for their incredible effort in hiring amazing educators. I also wanted to publicly acknowledge Mr. Greg Gagliardi for changing my life and the life of every student who has had the honor of working with him on the East Side Editorial Board. He is an amazing educator. That's it.
Great, thank you. So with that, I will see Dr. Malash if there's any questions that you can answer this evening.
I do, Mrs. Seidel. There's a couple of things before I address any of the comments. I did receive an update from our high school West students. If you remember back at our action meeting at the end of September, neither of the high schools were able to provide an update. So the students did provide an update today from high school West. So if you're okay, as we're coming to public comment, I would like to share this.
Absolutely.
This is the Cherry Hill West Community Report from October 13th, 2020. Sent by Nathan Kong and Alexander Turley, representative and alternate representative from West. First, general information. This past month of full remote learning has certainly been an adjustment for all of us. Staff and students have certainly gotten in the jive of the remote learning process and are figuring out what approaches are the best to form a conducive learning environment. Students feel that the patience and compassion shown by the staff is admirable. While technical difficulties may occur, they are inevitable and students understand that solutions are coming around. Athletic news. This past month, the majority of our fall sports teams have been regularly having responsibly held outdoor practices. Teams are in line with the district's guidelines, masks are given to all players, and players are divided into cohorts for regular practice. Our football team has just started to have their regular games. Students, staff, and the community are certainly enjoying the opportunity to now come out again for the bright Friday night lights and enjoy the competition between two schools. Both soccer teams and the field hockey team are now regularly having practices and preparations for their upcoming games. Student athletes are thankful for the opportunity to continue to play their favorite sports with their teammates, and student athletes are overall glad to be able to come together in team camaraderie in these trying times. Performing arts news, instrumental music. Recently, our marching band has been practicing diligently over the past few weeks, having multiple practices a week before school started, and now one practice weekly and possibly playing at a game on Fridays. Our musicians are taking all possible health and safety precautions when possible, such as social distancing while playing and not playing, and masks when not playing. Choral music. Currently, the choral music department is trying to make plans for rehearsal for the possibility of returning to school. Currently, the choirs are working on pieces for a virtual choir, as well as personal pieces for a project reflecting on the effects of the past few months on us. We look forward to watching the spectacle of a digital choir once again. Theater. The theater department is working on an all-digital production, We Will Rock You. Inspired by all digital productions in the theater community, the West Theater Department is looking forward to bringing the magic of theater home to everyone. Acting and singing will be recorded and edited onto digital sets in order to emulate the stage. And miscellaneous news, SAT. Just recently, on Saturday, September 26th, SAT testing was held at both High School East and High School West. Seniors who have not taken an SAT as of then were given priority registration by the College Board. Classrooms had desks that were distanced properly, and practice did their best to ensure guidelines were followed. So that's a report from the team from High School West. I expect that we'll have reports from both high schools at our meeting on the 27th when we are all together again. So a couple of responses. Again, I agree with the information about the SFRA and the funding. I encourage people to stay informed, to be informed, and to maintain communication with our legislators. There are no additional bids that have gone out at this point based on the work from the reports from ERI. That's correct, Ms. Sugars?
Not yet, but we're getting ready to.
We're getting ready to send stuff out, finalizing discussions and the information from that group.
Yep.
There's training going on in all of our schools related to hybrid training, related to the hybrid teaching. That is involving the principal, staff members, our technology coach, Mrs. Heather Esposito, who was one of the staff members that we recognized for her 20 years of service to the district tonight. So that is ongoing. It's always great to hear people write in. William Alexander Einhorn and Ann Einhorn, thank you for your positive words about the teachers that you mentioned and the impact that they had on your life and on your children's lives. To our East student who wrote in about robotics, I appreciate you sharing your perspective and the information. Please make sure that you are in contact with Dr. Perry and the team over at High School East as they work to address, having an advisor for the robotics club. Talked about hybrid learning, advisors, progress. Comment. Oh, so tonight is the last night that we will be using Microsoft Teams for the broadcasting of our board meetings. There's been a change in the directive that we received from the state about public comment. We need to have a way for people to actually use their own voice and speak in their own voice to deliver public comment. We're in the process of transitioning the board meetings over to the Zoom platform, which we will use on Tuesday, October the 27th. For the first time. Additional information and details will come out early next week about what that'll look like so people can be familiar with it, can ask questions if they have any. Folks will still be able to submit email to Mrs. Sugars if they're unable to use the Zoom platform, but we will encourage people to use the Zoom platform. Like I say, early next week information will come out about that. I don't recall whether Dr. Mahan mentioned during her comments about We Return to Learn, is there is a survey that's coming out. It's either going to be tomorrow or Thursday, asking parents as we share information at the end of the week, again, reminding people about the hybrid schedule, if they want their child to be on the hybrid schedule in November, or if they would like to remain on full remote. We ask parents to make those determinations in August. We do have a list. We just want parents sometimes parents change their mind. So we want to give folks the opportunity to weigh in once again on that. And I believe that's it.
Okay, great. So on behalf of the board, I want to thank everybody for submitting their public comment today. We certainly appreciate your feedback and your comments. I do just want to give a special shout out and thank you to Mr. Alexander, Ms. Einhorn, and Mr. Yarez for recognizing these amazing teachers that we have in our district and their impact on children's lives. It's definitely a great reminder of why we're all here, which is for the children. And so that was really nice to hear. So thank you for that. And with that, that brings us to the end of our meeting tonight. So I will would like to make a motion to adjourn, and I will ask Mrs. Neary for a second.
I second.
Great, thank you. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the motion carries. Have a wonderful night, and thank you again for our public attendees, and we look forward to seeing you on October 27th.
Yes.
Thank you, everybody. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.